Urgent, Europe has aimed its mega weapons at Putin. The bomb has exploded. Russia will get hit hard in an instant. Poland is on alert and the Ukrainian armed forces are receiving mega weapons. There's another fighter in the ring. Kazakhstan has outmaneuvered Moscow. Putin's jaw dropped at what he saw. The dictator is backing down, but then he runs into Trump. A slap from Washington brings Russia back to reality. China is holding its ground and preparing to finish off its former ally. The US is now breathing freely. Why is this dangerous for Russia? All this and more in our episode Hellpoint. Europe is finally going on the offensive. At this very moment, mega weapons are being deployed. The allies are holding hands tightly. In the sky, a network of drones, radars, and modern interception systems is shooting down Russian attacks before they even get close. Putin is already getting nervous, Shaheds are becoming ineffective, and ballistic missiles are falling on the heads of Russians. It has begun. Kremlin is in turmoil, and the strategic initiative is shifting to Kyiv. All the details about this, don't miss what's next.
After a series of Russian drone incursions into the airspace of European countries, it became clear that the old air defense systems can no longer cope. These cheap drones flying in swarms break through conventional defense schemes and deplete the stocks of expensive missiles and combat aircraft. This very challenge became the impetus for the European Union's ambitious drone wall initiative.
Almost all countries, whether from the region, be it Eastern, Northern, or Western Europe, have encountered such manifestations. Of this new type of hybrid actions by the Russian Federation in the sky, violating airspace, and the fact that a response is needed is already undeniable.
The idea is to create a unified defense system along the eastern border of the EU, where sensors, radars, satellites, interceptors, and artificial intelligence will be able to detect, classify, and neutralize threats in real time.
We need to create a European system that will enable Europe to develop advanced drone solutions, drawing inspiration from what is already being done in Ukraine.
It is Ukraine that plays a key role in this development. 4 years of war have made Ukrainian experience critically valuable. Here, tactics are tested, technologies are refined, and production chains for combat and counter-drone systems are established. All of this happens in combat conditions, not on a training ground.
Now, drones have changed absolutely everything, and the best drone experts in the world are Ukrainians. I've seen videos of situations where a swarm of drones goes up against a single soldier. Even a single drone can lure a soldier into a trap while another attacks him from the other side. So we're already seeing how drones are becoming increasingly deadly. This will change the way wars are fought in every country. It's not just about drones, but also about how to protect your roads, how to secure your airports. How do you prevent drones from invading your territory? That's why Europe needs to quickly learn from Ukrainians how to defend its skies.
Ukraine offers not only experience but also an industrial base. Local manufacturers such as TechX can supply equipment, train operators, share combat experience, and standardize solutions to meet Europe's needs. The integration of Ukrainian technologies and expertise will make it possible to create adaptive, fast, and cost-effective systems, capable of operating in real combat time. Funding is already being processed through the SAFE instrument and the EU defense budget, which allocates up to 100 billion euros for the eastern flank. The drone wall plan includes 3 directions: drone, land, and maritime lines of defense, which should be integrated into a single system. It will be able to control the airspace from the Baltic to the Black Sea.
Judging by the information and news we read from different countries, self-determination is currently at the stage of either being found or forming a consensus between the internal situations in each individual country, which may require changes in legislation, and how this will later be addressed at a common, collective level. That is, in order to reach a common level, a unified position at the level of European Union countries and NATO countries. It is necessary to reach an agreement within each country, understanding that in some places this will require changes to legislation, while elsewhere it will require more thorough explanations to society so that the actions are clear, there is support and there is understanding, which is important for countries where democracy exists. Thank you. a constant electoral process where any step can be used by the opposition.
This project is part of a larger strategy called Shy 2030. These are 4 initiatives aimed at strengthening the EU's external corridors, protecting against drones, creating a joint air defense system, and even providing space services for military needs. The main goal is to deter Russia and Belarus, especially considering that by 2030, the capabilities of the Russian armed forces may increase. The plan is to strengthen the eastern border by the end of 2026 and to deploy a drone defense wall by 2027. At the same time, the EU is creating an integrated air defense system. Space-based intelligence, communication, and navigation services will support defense tasks. However, experts warn that bureaucracy and slow processes in Europe could delay the project. But if Europe can quickly establish this cooperation, the Shield 2030 could become a new line of defense, which will protect not only EU countries, but also Ukraine.
Poland is urgently making a move that changes the entire balance of power. Warsaw is switching to full defense mode and throwing everything it can into the game to strengthen Ukraine. New batches of equipment are heading to the border without any pauses, warehouses are shipping secret cargoes around the clock, and military factories are shifting into overdrive. There is panic in the Kremlin. Poland is showing a resolve that Moscow did not expect. What surprises the ally keeping in reserve? And why could it be a shock for the Russian command? More on this ahead.
The Kremlin is expanding the geography of the war. Europe and NATO are preparing for a possible invasion by the Russian dictator.
This needs to be done subtly, carefully, but it absolutely must be done.
Drones are increasingly violating the airspace of European countries. Such incidents have been recorded in Denmark, Norway, Romania, and Poland. In this way, the Kremlin is increasing pressure on Europe through hybrid attacks and preparations for a large-scale conflict. Poland remains the primary country at risk. The strike on September 10th is a deliberate, carefully planned Russian strategy.
Poland is currently one of the priorities for the Russian Federation. One of them, not the only one, but one of them. Why? Because a large amount of military cargo is transported through Polish territory toward Ukraine to the Ukrainian fronts. And Russia understands perfectly well that if this route is cut off, Ukraine will be left isolated and the logistics will be disrupted. Cut off, it would have to be rebuilt, and at that point they could actually achieve some territorial gains. And
in the event of an invasion of Poland, Russia could prepare a force of 100,000 to 150,000 troops to carry out the Suwałki corridor scenario.
At the moment, up to 40,000 troops have been directly redeployed to the borders from the Republic of Belarus. The Polish military is conducting similar actions in Ukraine on the territory of the Baltic states. In addition, at the moment, a naval component of joint NATO exercises is taking place in the Baltic Sea.
There are also increasing reports that Russia may attack the Baltic countries. Since the beginning of the Great War in Ukraine, Russian military forces have increased the number of provocations in the Baltic region.
currently, it is clear that the Russian Federation does not have the forces for a full-scale invasion, as was done in Ukraine. Although our military notes that over the past 8 months there has indeed been a steady monthly decrease in the amount of Russian equipment destroyed on the front lines. In other words, the graphs keep going lower and lower starting from January-February, specifically for 3 types of armed forces: anti-tank defense assets, tanks, and IFVs. So, there's a lot of room here for speculation. Why? Either they have started producing fewer tanks and IFVs, or they are producing them but hiding them somewhere in reserve for some other purposes.
Another pretext to start a war is the Estonian city of Narva. It is located in the east of the country. A small river separates it from Russia. Even today, in the narratives of Kremlin propaganda, Narva is portrayed as a city where Estonians actively humiliate Russians.
These are roughly 200 to 300 riflemen from the mountains who could infiltrate the settlement, hypothetically Narva, and carry out the same scenario there as they did in Crimea, as they did in Donetsk. They seize the post office, the telephone exchange, the telegraph, the mayor's office, and declare the creation of some kind of People's Republic, and then ask Putin to send in troops. The scenario is very realistic.
Only in Russia, everyone is shouting from all sides that they don't want a war with Europe or NATO. Also, former President Medvedev, who is known for his drinking, claims that Russia has supposedly always come to Europe as a liberator, not as an invader. And Putin's notorious spokesperson Maria Zakharova has started accusing Ukraine of preparing an anti-Russian provocation. Supposedly, Russian drones are being used in Poland and Romania to push NATO into a war against Russia.
This story came from the Russian Federation's Foreign Intelligence Service. I saw it yesterday. It's a very funny story. I'll explain why it's funny. The Russian Federation's Foreign Intelligence Service is a paper tiger. Actually, it's not even a paper tiger, it's a paper bear. This organization isn't even respected within the Russian security hierarchy. No one counts them, no one fears them, and even ordinary police officers don't see them as authoritative. And all that's left for this service is to generate some random ideas, random conspiracies, just to show that their work matters.
In response to Russia's threats, NATO and EU countries are urgently strengthening their defenses, building a drone wall, and discussing providing Ukraine with air defense systems to create a shield. After Russia violated Polish airspace, NATO launched Operation Eastern Guard. Denmark has called up several hundred reservists. Soldiers have been ordered to report as soon as possible. At
the moment, air units are being redeployed to the territory of Poland and Romania. These are NATO's flanks. In addition, there is a redeployment of accompanying NATO country units to the territory of the Baltic states. Naval exercises are being conducted in the Baltic Sea area. It is confirmed that new US aircraft carriers are currently in Danish waters. And this is a serious signal to the Russian Federation. In addition, French Rafale jets have been deployed to Poland, and these are nuclear-capable aircraft.
In fact, Russia began threatening NATO as far back as 10 years ago. At that time, Turkey, led by Erdogan, was in the crosshairs. Back in 2015, a Russian bomber violated the country's airspace. According to Turkish authorities, the Russian aircraft did not respond to warnings before it was shot down by an F-16 fighter jet.
Now, Putin's strategic goal is the collapse of the collective West and the undermining of trust among NATO members. Urgent geopolitical lightning has struck the Kremlin. Kazakhstan is abruptly changing course and no longer plays by Moscow's rules. Astana is rapidly stepping out of Russia's shadow and forming its own center of power. Tokayev is betting not on Putin but on the global heavyweights. The meeting at the White House became the point of no return. A new player has appeared on the map of influence, one who now speaks to the Kremlin without fear or deference. Is Kazakhstan ready to take a step towards Ukraine in the near future? We'll find out in just a moment. Kazakhstan, once friendly to Putin, is supplying weapons to Ukraine. The former head of the Romanian National Environmental Guard, Octavian Berceanu, claims that he was offered 10 million euros for a deal involving the import of ammunition from Kazakhstan. The Russian-made ammunition was allegedly going to be repainted and sold to Europe for
If there is a political necessity, Kazakhstan will provide its own territory for important official diplomatic meetings at the level of heads of state.
According to Berceanu, he reported the offer to the criminal prosecution authorities and the National Anti-Corruption Directorate. At the same time, there was allegedly talk of another matter, the opening of a weapons or ammunition factory on Romanian territory.
At the moment, it should be noted that Kazakhstan has chosen a strategy of maneuvering between the interests of its key political partners. These are, first and foremost, the United States, Russia, and China. It should be noted that despite the fact that Kazakhstan is a CSTO country, and moreover the Tokayev regime actually came to power thanks to Russian bayonets, at present Kazakhstan is pursuing a policy that is practically independent from the Russian Federation.
Meanwhile, following the results of the Central Asia-US Summit, Kazakhstan signed agreements worth $17 billion.
We're talking about rare earth metals, primarily tungsten. In addition, agreements were signed on cooperation in the field of IT technologies and a possible memorandum on the sale of 30 Boeing aircraft.
The president of Kazakhstan believes that the current US administration has a greater understanding of the importance of Central Asia, and he noted Trump for his more conciliatory approach toward Russia. At the same time, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev calls a ceasefire in Ukraine possible. He even praised Putin for his flexibility. Kazakhstan.
This country was actually the first member nation within the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, to take the step of increasing its oil production, even though there was strong and persistent opposition from the Russian state at the time. Kazakhstan is a country located in Central Asia. It is one of the largest countries in the world by land area, and its capital city is Astana.
Is trying to maintain relations with both Russia and the United States, taking a tactic of keeping silent about the war. But at the same time, it does not support our country at the same level as other European partners who consistently send aid packages to Ukraine.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Moscow is up to its old tricks again. It disrupts negotiations and dictates its own rules. Washington stands behind Kyiv. The White House does not believe the Kremlin's promises. Russia is watching Trump in Leslavo, but the result is zero. The US leader is tired and, it seems, has truly turned his back on Putin. That moment has come. Is the Kremlin caught in the grip of political influence? Or will this finally lead to a decision on ending the war? All the details are in the following report.
Peace talks between Russia and Ukraine have been suspended. According to Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Serhiy Kislytsia, Putin refuses to meet with Volodymyr Zelensky, and the meetings with the Russian delegation in Istanbul have yielded no tangible results. In
a dictatorship, it is impossible to have productive discussions with negotiating groups that represent the dictator. They have a very strict mandate, and they must defend the position they have been ordered to take.
Following the negotiations in Istanbul in the spring and summer of 2025, Russia did not change its previous demands, including those regarding the denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine.
They are well aware of our position. As I have already said before, and as I have mentioned previously, they have our exact position in writing. There is absolutely nothing secret or hidden about it at all. In fact, everything is completely open and transparent, with no confidential details being withheld. It was voiced by the president, by Putin in June 2024 when he spoke at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. At the same time, Lavrov stated that the Kremlin still expects a meeting between Putin and Trump in Budapest. But the White House no longer believes in the Kremlin's empty promises.
Moscow's intentions can only be judged by its actions, and it has made it clear what it wants. It needs the rest of Donetsk region. And obviously, Ukraine will not agree to this. Right now, we see that Russia continues to carry out long-range strikes on Ukrainian territory, obviously aiming to destroy its energy system and, so to speak, demoralize the country.
At the moment, Russian diplomacy is trying to shift the blame for halting the negotiation process onto Ukraine. Moscow has no intention of ending the war, but at the same time, the Kremlin does not want to be left without a dialogue with Washington. The Russians are now trying to somehow shake up this diplomatic ice, breaking it in various ways. And let's say both formally through diplomacy and informally, they are currently working through the J7 and other communication channels. They have most likely tried to revive once again the Istanbul negotiation process. But in any case, the Russians are not ready to accept Trump's ultimatum. And Trump's ultimatum is very tough. Any political negotiations will only begin when there is active fighting. According to US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Washington has practically exhausted its potential to strengthen sanctions against Russia and will now focus on enforcing the existing restrictions. And once again, the White House is urging its European partners to put more pressure on Russia, particularly regarding Putin's shadow fleet. Europe is also important, as it should participate in this negotiation process because this is a war taking place on European soil. And Europe, one way or another, plays an important role in ensuring, let's say, the overall framework of European security. When it comes to ending the war in Ukraine, the White House administration will no longer fall for Putin's tricks, such as the empty talks in Istanbul with the pseudo-historian Medinsky, or the fruitless Alaska. Trump won't agree to another Anchorage, Alaska, a political slap in the face from Putin. Well, because it seems to me he's already tired of getting these slaps from Putin. It only undermines his ratings. Under significant sanctions pressure, Putin will likely have to abandon his maximalist demands and agree to direct negotiations with Volodymyr Zelensky.
China is urgently stepping into the big global game. Beijing is no longer lagging behind and is gradually seizing the initiative from Moscow. Xi Jinping is getting closer to Trump while simultaneously pushing Putin into the background. This shift in the balance of power could be fateful. The Kremlin is losing its economic and political footholds, and former allies are beginning to exploit Russia's weakness for their own benefit. Has the moment of truth arrived for the Russian Federation and the world? All of this will be covered in the following report.
The collapse of Putin's empire. Russia has ceased to be a center of influence and power.
You must not be afraid. Whoever starts to get scared will lose everything right away. But it's absolutely necessary to understand what might happen.
This won't really change the situation because the invasion of Ukraine has become not just a military but also a geopolitical suicide for the Kremlin. And while Putin is preoccupied with the war, China is taking over Russia's economic and political positions, from the Caucasus to the Caspian Sea. Simply put, Moscow is losing influence in places where it had been considered a leading player for decades.
For China, this is an opportunity to strengthen its position in the region and to advance both its political and economic projects. And China is taking full advantage of this. In fact, this doesn't only apply in Central Asia, we see similar trends on the African continent and in Latin America.
The countries of Central Asia have already stopped viewing Moscow as the key center. After all, it has become clear that Russia is not only weakened by sanctions and isolation, but is also turning into a toxic partner.
Many of them articulate this position as a policy of multi-vectorism, which means they seek to engage with several major powers and maintain flexible foreign relations to serve their own national interests. Under this guise, they are in fact prioritizing and asserting their own interests more actively, making choices that best support their domestic needs and long-term goals. Since the launch of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is China's ambitious plan to improve global trade and infrastructure connectivity, China has been steadily advancing its influence and presence step by step through a series of projects, investments, and diplomatic efforts.
Steadily expanding its influence and gradually. Over Central Asia. It finances roads, railway hubs, pipelines, and more, turning the region into a new transit bridge between Asia and Europe, bypassing
If you take a closer look at the current global geopolitical map, you can clearly see that the trends for President Vladimir Putin and for the nation of Russia, they are very discouraging. Putin, who for a long time dreamed of expanding his vast empire by conquering the entire nation of Ukraine, or alternatively by enlarging the territory of Ukraine and thereby spreading his political, economic and military influence over this strategically important region, has essentially lost all of his international standing and, from being considered a major global player on the world stage, has now become merely a regional dictator with limited power and influence. In
2024, China's trade with Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan amounted to almost $95 billion. This is more than double the Russian figure.
Basically, this is China's fundamental strategy, namely economic and consequently political expansion. Therefore, as we know, according to the laws of balance, where something is lost, something else is inevitably added. And of course, this concerns Russian influence. It is being pushed out very quickly both in Central Asia and in other regions, which allows China not only to expand its influence, but also to sell its goods to influence regimes and to strengthen its international position and coalition.
The eastern regions of Russia are also in the crosshairs of the Celestial Empire. According to economic experts' forecasts, the volume of Chinese investment in the region could reach 1 trillion rubles in 2025. Thus, the Kremlin risks losing control over 40% of its own territory.
The loss of influence by Russia means a strengthening of China as a global player and as one of the main centers of global political gravity. As for future prospects, they really do not look particularly bright for Russia.
Yet another blow to the Russian Federation from the Celestial Empire. Chinese oil refiners have begun to refuse purchases of Russian oil after the US and other Western countries imposed sanctions against Russia's leading producers and some of their clients. At the same time, the US is also stepping up its presence in Central Asia, seeking to reshape its partnership with the region and limit Chinese-Russian influence.
Washington understands China's desire to exert influence over this region. It is precisely trying today to counteract in the context of the confrontation currently taking place between Washington and Beijing. And Trump's meeting with the leaders of the 5 Central Asian countries is nothing more than a response to the developments that, in fact, have long been taking place within the framework of China's initiative.
Putin is slowly but surely losing Central Asia. Russia is losing its authority in the countries of the former USSR, which the Kremlin has always regarded as its satellites. The US has succeeded, the shutdown is over, a clear signal to its allies. Ukraine applauds Washington, and Kyiv will receive a powerful boost for its defense and for restoring the front. Weapons are now flowing in again, and new sanctions are on the way. The Kremlin is definitely not happy about this. Putin is already preparing a plan B and sharpening his teeth for Trump. Should we expect any sharp moves from the White House chief in response in the near future? We'll find out in just a moment. You can't run a country like this, Trump declared, and ended the shutdown. The US president seems to enjoy breaking his own records. The budget pause lasted 43 days, 8 days longer than the previous pause under Trump.
And now it is an honor for us to sign this incredible bill and get our country working again. Thank you.
The shutdown had consequences not only for Americans, but also for countries that depend on Washington, including
So yes, on the one hand, the processes have been unblocked, but this is only a postponement of the deadline.
While the US government was shut down, arms exports worth $5 billion also froze. This aid was intended for NATO allies, including Ukraine.
The processes for supplying Ukraine are ongoing. They were under the jurisdiction of the Pentagon. And the Pentagon, as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't blocked even during the shutdown. Yes, there was certainly an imbalance as well as a breakdown in communication, primarily because some government employees were directly affected by the shutdown. For example, this included those working in the Oval Office and also certain ministries. Here, indeed, the logistics and practicalities of making bureaucratic decisions were, at least in part, partially disrupted.
Now that the shutdown is over, the blocked contracts for arms supplies are coming back into effect. But the question is how quickly all of this will actually start working.
Now that the process has been unblocked, the bureaucratic and instrumental components will, of course, be implemented in a more dynamic and effective manner than before. Does this mean that Ukraine will receive the necessary weapons more quickly? It's hard to say.
Here, we need to focus more on the official position of our delegations in the US. The unfreezing of American contracts has also become an important signal for NATO allies.
Of course, all NATO countries look to the key NATO country, which is the US, because all processes are tied specifically to this country, both the military-industrial complex and the coordination of military contingents. And military training, in short, absolutely everything is
focused on the US. And when the US, for about 2 months or so, is stuck in a kind of limbo, well, of course, this generally has a certain negative effect on NATO as a whole. But in the Kremlin, they probably understand that ending the shutdown is not exactly in their favor.
When the United States is destabilized from within by processes like a shutdown, of course, the Russian Federation will only add fuel to the fire. That's obvious. And they will spread information and do everything possible to prolong this process until the states stabilize, remember about the Russians, and are able to act in a consolidated way. For example, to expand this sanctions package or, say, to prepare the next one.
Interestingly, the temporary funding for the US has been extended until January 30th, although the issue that caused the shutdown in Congress still hasn't been resolved.
On the one hand, the processes have been unblocked, but it's only a postponement of the deadline. Regarding the issue of medical...
The reform that the Democrats are talking about its extension, about Obama, they are supposed to return to it in December, at the end of December. So yes, the processes have been unblocked, but now they could also bring along other budgetary consequences. According to economists' estimates, the daily losses from the shutdown for the American economy amounted to about $15 billion. That's all from me for now. This was me, Darina Hutsakalo. Even more scorching news in our next episode. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you!